Hi everyone, Drekkie here, and this is the first budget dual dash cam I've used that does 1440p front and 1080p back, and that's pretty damn cool. But it's also kind of a good way to burn through micro SD cards. This is the Hawkeye Q3 Pro, an unreleased dash cam that claims it will be cost competitive with the Viofo A129. And well, if that's true, the A129 has quite the competition coming. This camera's front-facing video quality is strikingly good in day and night, with daytime license plate readability surpassing any other budget cam I've tried to date. The camera itself is in the ordinary stealthy tube shape, similar to some of the Mini series. It's made out of a weighty plastic and has a solid feel to it. It's mounted by a sticker to the windshield and 2 mounts are included in the box, although I wouldn't really consider this camera easy to move between vehicles. You've got to plug 2 cables into it with a headphone jack looking plug for the rear camera and a micro USB for power. I suppose in the other car you could just use the camera as a single forward facing unit, but I'm of the opinion that having a fixed camera in each vehicle is a better strategy just because there's no way to forget the camera. On the body it's pretty straightforward, there's only one button, no emergency lock button. It's just this single Wi-Fi toggle that turns Wi-Fi on and off with a cheery vocal prompt letting you know what's happening.
Wi-Fi is on.
Install the camera using the app to line it up correctly, set the date, set your plate number, and then it'll automatically start and stop recording when you turn on and off your car. Just normal dash cam things. Also, the rear camera has this red wire which is to detect reversing, but since the camera has no screen, that feature is actually not present, so you can just cut it off or hide it. As for other features, the app includes a parking mode if you do hardwire this camera, and you can turn on and off the stamp, up and down the mic volume. Again, pretty typical dash cam stuff. Front-facing video quality is where this camera excels. It defaults to the H.265 video codec, which results in lots of detail, although the video is at a fixed bitrate. It's approximately 1 GB per 6 minutes of driving, as I said, destroying memory cards. This camera, funny enough though, does seem to leave 8 GB of free space on the 32 gig card I used, so over the course of that 32 gigs, I'd get just over 2 hours of driving before it starts to overwrite old footage. Anyways, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. As I said in the intro, this camera performs remarkably well in all lighting conditions. During the day, under ideal conditions, you can often read oncoming license plates 2 lanes over, and that's astounding. Most of the other dash cams I've tested at this price point, it's really only possible to read plates on immediately adjacent cars, and even sometimes that's a bit iffy. This camera though, way more consistent with plate readability. Compare it to the Viofo A129, that's the camera that I run in my car 24/7. The video that the Q3 Pro produces is a little bit darker, but that exposure is actually more accurate, whereas the A129 it tends to blow out these shadows a little bit. If we freeze frame for example on this car's license plate, you'll see what I mean, where half the license plate is just a little bit too bright. Look at just how much easier it is to read on the Q3 Pro. In overcast lighting, the footage from the 2 cameras are more comparable. Back to the Q3 on its own, I've got absolutely no complaints about the front-facing camera, even as we get into darker situations. Sure, it's not as bright as some other cameras, however it tends to hold details a little bit sharper and less blurry, and is overall more than adequate. The rear camera though, it's a little bit closer to a low-end 1080p camera compared to the front's high-end 2K. It's more similar in video quality to the B1W or the Xiaomi 7D Mi than it is to something like the A129 for example. Yes, it is 1080p, but it does smooth details out a little bit. Look at the road for example in this shot. There's only a small section where you can see details on the pavement, whereas if you switch to the front camera, there's so much more to see in terms of pebbles, rocks, cracks in the road. The rear camera, it's serviceable during the day, honestly, good enough. Just that the front camera sets such a high standard for video quality that the rear camera kind of falls flat in comparison. Any car that comes close enough behind you though, and you will be able to read the license plates. Now, all that being said, there is one thing that the rear camera excels at, and that is under street lights at night. Under typical city lighting, the rear camera produces solid video, with that same smoothing that you see during the day eliminating the vast majority of image noise. When cars come up on me in traffic lights, I have no trouble reading plates, nor do I have trouble seeing that this guy behind me is texting before he decides to pass dangerously. Yeah, in my opinion, people who do this sort of stuff shouldn't be driving. He even zips past the next person too. Out in the country, under pitch black, you won't really be able to see anything, but in the city, this rear camera is very good overall. Audio quality from the camera is great too. This camera actually lets you set a volume for audio recording, unlike some cameras which just have on and off. Here's what the audio sounds like.
Oh wow, this is the first time I've been down this way since they did the renovation to the seawall here. And look at that path. That is pretty sweet. But about now we should be looking for a parking spot. It's going to be a tough one to say the least.
Now, for all you techie dashcam nerds out there, this camera is based on a high silicon chipset, which is something I usually expect to find in an action camera, not a dashcam. The front sensor is an OmniVision OS04B10, and I have no idea what the rear sensor is. Also, pretty importantly, the camera is based on a capacitor instead of a battery, so it should hold up in hot climates decently well. So yeah, this camera, yeah. Okay, the front camera for me, it sets a new standard for license plate readability in the budget category. The difference between this camera and some of the other 1080p dual cams I've tested is quite mind-blowing, with far more detail and license plates being easily readable. Do you want to see a full comparison with the Viofo A129? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate your subscriptions and your support. You guys are the lifeblood to my YouTube channel.